back to the show. We're thrilled you're here. And this is a really sensitive topic, but it really has gripped the nation, and especially that this tragedy that happened with the death. And talk to us about it. I mean, I think that some of the things people are very confused about is the repeated calls about not sexual, but physical abuse going on, and nothing being done about it. There are a lot of people are concerned that they were pulled over, and you can tell us, was it Wyoming or Utah? They were pulled over somewhere, and the call had been made that she was there was an altercation between the two of them, and they didn't do anything about it. I'm sure those state troopers know that they did I'm sure they did what was appropriate with the law, but I'm sure they have a lot of feelings about that. We appreciate their hard work. But I tell you what, they don't mess around in Texas. You know what I mean? If you get a call in Texas and there's like a scratch on you or a hair is misplaced, you're picked up. There's no question. They don't care who started it. They don't care if you both started it. They'll arrest one of you or they'll arrest both of you. And they don't really mess around. So I guess maybe this becomes sort of a state issue. But people are really wondering, my gosh, how did they let him get away? And why weren't they watching him sooner? I know it's alleged. Nothing's been proven against him. You're innocent till proven guilty. But there was a lot of suspicion. And I think they were talking about this other case with the very famous, I don't remember who it was, but he was still alleged, and they didn't let that guy out of their sight. You know, in all those TV shows, they say, don't leave town. You know, we're watching you. You can't arrest you yet, but don't leave town. And my last thing, and I'm sure you'll address, is the parents. You know, I did hear that in wherever they are, I guess Florida, they're not allowed. That the parents and children, and I think grandparents, have immunity. They can't be held accountable if it's after the fact. If they were accessory before, but not after, which is really interesting. So these are the naive things I know. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say about it.
Well, first, thanks for having me. I love being on your program, and I think we should replicate it 10,000 times over because you guys do such great work. So I really applaud the work you're doing. And Tova, it's great to see you again. I don't know where your sidekick is. He's not here today, but great to see you. And as a fellow singer, I love seeing the Gilbert men there. So good on you. So in any case where a person ends up dead, and the pathologist here ruled that the cause of death was homicide, we want to figure out who did it, and we want to nail them. This is sort of part of the way we think. We watch Law and Order, we watch all these cop shows, and I think most people on this screen here probably assume that Brian Laundrie did it. And I'm going to try to convince you to think twice about that. I don't know whether he did it or didn't do it, but there's a lot of legal issues here, and I think I want to try to untangle some of those for you. And I really want you to pepper me with questions too, because I was a domestic violence prosecutor for a long time. I tried homicide cases and violent sex crimes cases. So these dynamics are not unfamiliar to me as I see the facts in this case. In the back of this, I want you to keep three concepts in your head, okay? Because Janine's questions about why didn't they track him and why didn't they arrest him and all this stuff really is a normal question to ask, but you got to sort of walk through some of these legal concepts that we hear on Law and Order, but we really don't understand it in practice. From top to bottom, reasonable suspicion is the bottom one. Probable cause is the next one up, and I'll explain what these are. And beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard of proof in criminal trials that the government has to prove to a jury so that they can be firmly convinced to convict somebody. And so reasonable suspicion is, as it sounds, a suspicion that a police officer has that a crime may or something illegal is afoot. It allows the police to temporarily detain somebody, and that's the key word, temporarily detain somebody to find out more. That's it. Now, if they find out more and looking at the totality of the circumstances, it looks like a crime was committed and that is the person who did it, then they may take the next step. And the next step may be arresting them. Probable cause is a different threshold. Probable cause is defined as more than a bare suspicion, but less than evidence that would justify a conviction. It's a practical, non-technical conception that comes from a Supreme Court case called Brinegar against the United States. And probable cause is not a high bar, but it means it's more likely than not that somebody did it. All right, so it's not reasonable suspicion down here. It's more likely than not that that person committed those crimes. And there's a whole bunch of case law on this that informs the police at the state level and the federal level. Beyond a reasonable doubt, as I said, is the standard that you apply at a criminal trial where we're not even there yet. So let's go back to the basics, the Fourth Amendment, all right? Because Janine's question really is talking around and getting at the Fourth Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment, maybe you guys can put it up on the screen, essentially says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable, that's the key word, unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue upon probable cause, that's the second one up, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. So let's do a 30-second run through the facts of the case as we know it. And then let's try to imagine not where we are now, but imagine where the police were as the things were unfolding in front of them at the time. Because it's very easy to be an armchair quarterback and assume now on the 5th of October, we knew what we should have done back in the day. It happened. So these two young lovers were engaged back in July of 2020. They got a van in December of 2020, and they departed 6 months later in July 2nd, 2021 to drive out west. They wanted to do a 4-month cross-country journey. Now, one of the things that we have in this case is we have a whole bunch of social media posts, and I assume you guys do social media. And you see that they traveled from Florida to Kansas to Colorado and Utah. And we know on the 4th of July, they were in Monument Rock, Kansas. July 8th, Colorado Springs, Colorado. They go through Colorado, Utah, July 16th at Zion, and then Bryce, July 21st, Mystic Hot Springs in Utah, July 26th, July 29th, Canyonlands. By the way, all these are great state parks. If you've never been, you should go. And then on August the 12th, they get to Arches National Park in Utah. And this is what Janine was talking about. And by the way, there is a video, a body camera video of the interaction by the police talking to Gabby and talking to Brian. All right. And there was a 911 call, which has not been released yet, and said that there's some sort of altercation going on. So they roll up on Gabby and Brian. They put her in the back of a police car, and they have him standing a few yards outside the police car by another police car, and they start talking. And you can watch the video. It's on the WashingtonPost.com or some of these other websites. And she says that she slapped him and she punched him in the chin when she thought he was going to leave her in Moab, which is another state park. And the couple also states, and the couple that reported what happened said that he did not hit her. So you have one person calling in to say, we see a guy hitting a girl. The police roll up and find these two there. They separate the two, which is their standard protocol. They put her in the back of the police car, him 2 cars away, standing outside. She says, yeah, I punched him, I hit him, I scratched him. They go talk to him, And by the way, when they're talking to her, they see a mark on her face here. And you can see right here on her arm, scratches and scratches here. This is common in domestic violence cases. All right. Usually it's the female who gets the injuries. Not always, but usually. They go talk to him, and he says, she punched me, she hit me, she scratched me, and oh yeah, I fought back. Now, in many jurisdictions, in a situation like this, where both of them say, I don't, let me turn this off. I don't want to press charges. And both of them said, I don't want to press charges. These are considered cross complaints. That's what it's called in the legal jargon. And the DA won't even take the case. And the police are sort of in a tough spot, because if the prosecutor, the gateway to the criminal justice system, is going to say, we're not going to do anything, then the police have to figure out how to de-escalate the situation, which is what they did. And in their protocol in Utah, they separated the two, and they made him spend the night. They put him up in a hotel sponsored by a domestic outreach group, believe it or not.
Wait, not Gabby. Not Gabby.
Him. It was him.
They put him in a hotel?
They put him in a hotel to separate the two, to calm the passions down. So that's why these facts are really important to get to the bottom of it. And I can tell you that in these criminal cases, and I've been a defense attorney, as you know, and a prosecutor and a judge, facts matter. You got to get to the bottom of the facts to see what is implicated. So let me ask the Gilbert men. Question: based on those facts alone, fellas, is there probable cause to believe that he assaulted her? More likely than not that he assaulted her. Yeah, he admitted it. He admitted it. She said it happened. Is there probable cause to believe that she assaulted him? Yeah, she admitted it, and he said so. But when you have these cross complaints like this, and the DA has a policy, which they do in most DA offices around the country, that they're not going to cross charge people because they're not going to testify against each other, then there's no case to be had. And so what happened is they're released on August 25th. Well, he's let out of the hotel. They get back in their van. And on August 25th, they head up to Grand Teton, Wyoming, to Yellowstone National Park. And on August the 30th, 5 days later, her family gets a weird text. And the text says, can you help Stan? That's her grandfather, who she never called Stan. I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls. Now, that aroused the suspicions of her parents, and they never hear from her again. Brian ends up on September 1st back in Northport, Florida, in the van that they purchased together, and there's no Gabby. 10 days later, Gabby's parents report her missing, and the police immediately go over to his house to find out what's going on. And when the parents answer the door, they hand the police a lawyer's phone number. Okay, so let me ask the Gilbert men again. Based on that, is there probable cause to believe that he killed her?
Yep.
Well, you don't even have a dead body. You know now there's a dead body.
It looked premeditated, but the premeditated lawyer's letter was already prepared. So it was like when they came to the door and the lawyer's letter was there, then it looks like someone who's not trying to protect himself, looks like someone who's scared.
Okay. Lots of people are scared of law enforcement. I don't like people.
He came back without her. He came back without her.
He came back without her, but at the time, we don't know if she's missing. We don't know if she went off with another guy. We don't know. Got to put yourself back in the position of September then. Not what we know now. Not what we know that he found the body and there's an autopsy. But back then,
well, they knew she was missing. They just didn't know she was dead at that point.
They knew she was missing, or they knew that she wasn't willing to reach out to her parents and do anything, because there's a lot of runaways.
But you know, I'm sort of with Jewel and Jorn, and I think we should all just sort of jump in this discussion today, because I think it's that kind of discussion. Tova, Kathy, it's all just joined in. I'm kind of with Jewel and Jorn in that. Now, see if I lost my train of thought.
Well,
He
they
came back.
said that
Came
they
back
should
with.
arrest him.
Came back. There may not be enough, because I know there are two different aspects to the story. One is the legals, and I know what you're building here is there's not enough to do anything. However, to me, it seems like there was enough suspicion to have watched him and to say you can't leave. I mean, there's something funky going on here, and also it's interesting. Now there's a federal warrant. I guess she's dead, and he's long gone. Someone just said recently they thought I saw him heading over to California. But I'm with Jill and Jorn is that it seems like there would have been something they could have done for suspicion, and then if you just to watch them, right, Jill and Jorn, just to watch it.
Yeah, I wouldn't think you could arrest on. I wouldn't think you could arrest for murder or anything. It would seem like you would have probable suspicion that he was trying to cover up some type of information because he already came back, said nothing, didn't report the person, and had a lawyer's letter ready.
Yeah. So let's wear two different hats for a second. Let's wear we're going to follow the Constitution, the presumption of innocence, and reasonable suspicion, probable cause, beyond a reasonable doubt hat. And then let's wear our common sense. Okay, really, what's going on here? Right? Because that's where Janine's headed, right? And that's where you guys are headed.
That's what
right?
I'm looking.
Right. And so,
well, no,
yeah.
Mainly, I just don't understand the suspicion part. I know there are times when they say you can't leave. We can't hold you, but you can't leave. And they just let him leave. And the fact that she was missing and they came back and he didn't tell his parents, that her parents, that she wasn't back. And I mean, I would have thought can you just answer that question? Because I keep repeating it and I don't want to repeat myself over. I'm sorry, it's on me. But why couldn't they at least say, we're watching you from behind in front of your house? Because I've heard this, whether it's true or not, by the pundits. And we can't do anything with you, but we're watching you and you cannot leave. Couldn't they have done that?
They can say the first part, although it'd be wiser for them not to say it at all. The smarter way to investigate this is to, when the family reports her missing on the September 11th, and the family had said, oh, here's the social media post, and she was with Brian Laundrie, her boyfriend, and they were engaged, and they broke off the engagement. We haven't heard from her since then. Another way of dealing that as the police is they could have surveilled his house. They could have stayed outside his house and just followed him around, because you're going to find out just as much, if not more, by following him around than alerting him that you're onto him. But they don't have any authority.
They could have done that. They could have followed him around.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Just like if I'm, if I commit a crime and I throw away the fruits of that crime in my garbage can outside my house, I've abandoned it. It's in plain view. He's in plain view when he leaves his house. He has no Fourth Amendment right to be secure in his place, people, etc. By walking around outside, by getting in his car, they can follow him around. That's perfectly lawful under the Fourth Amendment. But there is no crime at this point in time. There's a reasonable suspicion that something's weird going on here. But you got to remember also that there are a lot of runaways. There are a lot of people who disappear for all sorts of reasons.
Well, she didn't run away by herself. I mean, she was
run away by herself, but people run away all the time for all sorts of reasons. And we have no information that the police in Florida on September 11th had even been aware of what happened in Utah, or much less saw the video of the two being interviewed.
Well, I want Tobin and Kathy to jump in, because and I want Jill and George. So I'm gonna not ask another question after this, but that is a question. First of all, we learned something, didn't we? Under the Fourth Amendment, you can be followed outside your house. It's all dealing with the inside of the house, so that's cool. But do states not exchange information? Because that would have been interesting. Is there no kind of database about people or things?
There is no cloud out there that automatically pushes every criminal complaint and incident report to all other law enforcement. So there are 18,000 different law enforcement agencies around the country, and so just as a practical matter, there's no such vehicle. But to your point, Kathy, when they talked to the Petito's family and they said, look, they were on this cross-country trip and we knew they were in Utah, the Florida police could have gone to the authorities in Utah and say, hey, are there any missing persons reports or any suspicious activity reports or any calls that you all made? Now, Utah's a big state, as the young lady who's one of your assistants will tell you. I mean, I've been there, I love Utah. So there's a lot of law enforcement agencies in Utah, and maybe they would have gotten information or not about what happened when they cross-assaulted each other. But at the time of September 11th, when they find out that there was a guy who was engaged to a girl and they drove across the country in a van, and then the parents have a weird text from her, clearly not her, and then he shows up in the van 10 days later and the other across the country, there's no girl. I mean, you got to think something's weird, right? So that clearly rises to the level of reasonable suspicion. But there is nothing on this record that says that they came into contact with him. And there's
That what?
no.
That what? And
We
tell
don't have
them.
any- we know that when the police went to his parents' house, the parent gave the police a card, a business card for a lawyer for their son. But there's no evidence here that the son was anywhere to be seen at that time at all. So let's pretend.
Well, they could have questioned the neighbors because they all saw what was going on. They got in this truck and he got in there with them and he didn't come back with them. Tova, jump in.
I guess just to play devil's advocate, I guess I could see it from the perspective of the police as well, because, you know, she was an adult woman, she was 22, and just because she hadn't been in contact with the parents, you know, it's not the same as like if a child went missing. She was like an adult woman. So just because she hadn't been in contact with her parents doesn't necessarily point to a crime. I know now it's very obvious to us in hindsight, because a body was found and everything, but I could see how that could have slipped through the cracks. It obviously is terrible that it did, but I could see how they wouldn't immediatty jump to that conclusion, since I'm sure a lot of people are reported missing a lot. Also, I was wondering if, you know, where his parents presented them with a card for a lawyer, which a lot of people on this panel were taking as like, oh, that's probable cause. Oh, that's suspicious. But constitutionally or legally, are they allowed to use the constitutional right to access a lawyer as suspicion? Because it seems like that's the right that everyone has, whether they're guilty or not. Do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I do. And as usual, Tova, your questions and observations are spot on. And I'll vote for you for Secretary of State too. So you got my vote. And I'm sure the Gilbert men will vote for you too. Look, the fact that, we know certain things. We can make certain assumptions. He came home. Somehow he got a lawyer. Somehow the lawyer's card got in his parents' hands. You typically don't get a lawyer for good things you did, unless it's, you know, like buying a house or some other thing. So, you know, one thing leads to another, to have us probably suspect that he got a lawyer because he was worried that people are going to ask where Gabby is, and don't talk to me, talk to my lawyer. But his Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate himself isn't destroyed or erased because his parents hand a lawyer's business card to the police. In fact, that is the functional equivalent of his exercising his right to counsel. And so you can't build probable cause on the fact that somebody's exercising their constitutional right not to speak to the police. Because that would be, I mean, that is exactly what this was meant to prevent. You know, if I'm a police officer and I walk up to you, Tova, and let's pretend you were stealing, you know, cigarettes from CVS, and I say, hey, young lady, are you stealing cigarettes? And you hand me your lawyer's card. That's not an admission of guilt. All that is basically saying, I'm not talking to you, talk to my lawyer. And I can't say, oh, you handed me that card, there's reasonable suspicion right there. And that's the functional equivalent of what happened here. Now, let's take our pseudo lawyer hat off for a second, because I know Janine's gonna give me the growl look at again. Of course that's weird, right? Of course it's odd that he did that. We all know.
Do we know who owned the van, whose name it was
They
in?
bought it together.
It was together. So what about him having property that's also hers and her not being there? I mean, just thinking to yourself that, or her cell phone or anything along those lines. It seems like if they had wanted to find probable cause at that point, or if there had already been a body found at that point, they would have probably been able to find something.
So what the police did do on the 11th, when the parents handed the lawyer's business card to them, is clearly they went and got a warrant from a judge or a magistrate, which, remember, as you saw on the Fourth Amendment that was put up on the screen, a warrant cannot issue but for probable cause to believe that somebody committed a crime. And so the van was processed for evidence, and the processing of the evidence led them to eventually name Brian Laundrie, a person of interest, on the 15th of September, 4 days later. The hook here, though, and this is where this gets to the why the heck didn't they stop him and talk to him, is that the day before he was named a person of interest, he left. His parents said he left on the 14th. And so understanding, and I get what you fellas are saying, why didn't they talk to him? He was never made available to them. He didn't make himself available to them. His parents didn't give him them. And then when the parents gave the police a card of a lawyer that's representing their son, the police can't talk to the son now because he's represented by counsel. And so,
But if he's but if the person is represented by counsel, but they're not in any type of, they're not detained, and you're not even able to necessarily reach this person, then at what point did they decide, hey, we need to see where he even is?
So on the 17th of September, the police said that Brian Laundrie's attorney contacted them because the family wanted to discuss his disappearance, and they claimed that they had not seen Brian since the 14th of September, the day before he was even considered a person of interest. So let's play devil's advocate. Let me steal Tova's line here. In fact, let me turn it around on you, Tova, okay? Put your hardcore police or prosecutor hat on for a second. Okay, good, looks good on you. You're on September 11th, okay? And the police show up at the house, and the facts that I told you are still there. What do you want to charge him with, and what's the evidence of it? What do you want to charge Brian Laundrie with on September 11th, knowing that he came home in the van they co-purchased together, she's not there? That's it. What do you charge him with?
If you wanted to charge him with something, as
Yeah, you do. You're the hardcore prosecutor,
right,
and you want to prosecute.
right. Could you
You're
charge
channeling
him
your
with,
inner Gilbert men. What do you want to do? What do you want to prosecute him for?
yeah, could you prosecute him for, as they said, having possession of a van that's not,
He was a co-owner.
fully yours?
He was a co-owner. They
That
owned it in whole and in part.
Could they go back to the original domestic violence charge? And now that since it's cross, whatever, now that the other party is not there, could they go back on that and say, the situation
It
has
happened in
changed?
Utah. It happened in Utah, and it was a Utah state crime. We're now in Florida.
Could you charge him with failing to cooperate with police if you've reached out to his lawyer and he's not there?
Nope, he's exercising his Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate himself.
You've stumped me. I'm not sure.
All right, Gilbert men, sing us a song of guilt. Tell us
Was
what you want
he
to charge him with.
was he ever questioned directly though? Because what if you weren't?
There's nothing in the news reports that he was ever questioned by police.
Yeah, so I wouldn't think
in Florida.
So I don't
in
think you
Utah he
could-
was.
So I don't think you could charge him directly unless he did incriminate himself or in some way, shape, or form do that. But I would think that my stumbling block here in the legal process is how he was not ever questioned directly.
Right.
From for what's close to what was it, August he showed up. It was August 25th or 4th. He was in Utah, and then he shows back up in Florida, and then it's 2 weeks before he's named a person of interest and he's gone. So in that period of time, even if you couldn't charge him, you wonder what would have come of the discussion, because they clearly would have been asking him, where is she? And then in witnessing his response, they would have been able to have information to then act with, whether it was whatever that information was.
What if he said, I don't know who Jorn and who Jewel is, or who is who?
I'm Jewel.
That's Jewel, I'm
Yeah.
Jorn.
You're Jewel, okay. So Jewel, what if when the police knocked on the door at night and mommy and daddy answered the door, and they hand the lawyer business card to the police, and Brian's standing right next to his mommy and daddy, and the police say, excuse me, Brian, can we ask you a question? And he says, pound sand. Is that enough?
No, but then I would understand exactly who I'm dealing with.
What if he said, you look really sharp in your uniform, and I really appreciate your service to the community?
Well, then hopefully we'd continue to have the discussion and find Gabby.
And he says, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Talk to my lawyer.
And then same thing, I would understand who and what I'm dealing with. And at that point, though, I would believe he was that he knows something he doesn't want to get out, and he's going to try to run, because of that type of person, I believe, is never going to want to stand trial. And they have enough money to where they're going to run away before they would think they had to. So a person who's resourceful enough to end up from Florida to Utah, then back in Florida, and he's from his socioeconomic background, that person's running. That would be my belief as a investigator, cop, prosecutor, to think that if he's involved in any way, shape, or form, no, I got nothing to charge him on, but he's never going to stand trial.
Jordan, what do you think?
I mean, you can kind of, I was always one that if you don't tell the whole story, you can kind of tell that something's being hidden. How
does that square with your Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself?
well,
I mean, I get it when your mom says to you, Jordan, come on. Did you or did you not do your homework? You don't have a Fifth Amendment right against your mom to say, I refuse to answer your question, Mom, on the grounds I might incriminate myself, because she's not a state actor, right? She's a private citizen. And the Fifth Amendment and all the amendments are as against the government, right? Because remember, the Constitutional Convention of 1787 did not include a Bill of Rights. Remember, they actually did not include one at all. And it wasn't until 1791 when the original 10 Bill of Rights was passed. And those rights are the individual rights of the persons as against the government. But here, the police is the government. So when the police says to the guy, hey, I want to talk to you, and he says, talk to my lawyer. I mean,
if
Can
I
we
was
go back-
that concerned, if I
Back
was
to
that
reasonable suspicion.
yeah.
What? And Jordan, I just want to talk. I just can't help myself. I mean, reasonable suspicion. Everything Jewel and Jordan are saying, reasonable suspicion. So can't they talk to him based on reasonable suspicion?
No,
So you
no,
can't.
because he has a Fifth Amendment right not to testify, not to say anything that might incriminate himself. What
So
if he said,
they had no way of being able to talk to him, period.
no?
But they
that does
could
not
have,
mean-
surveilled him. They could-
Absolutely. They
they
could have
could-
put a stake
that's
out
what-
on his house.
That's what
They could have put a stakeout on his house. They could have gone to a magistrate and got a warrant to tap his cell phone. They could have gotten a warrant to look at his social media. They could have gotten his texts. They could have gotten a warrant and found who his cell site provider was and tracked his cell site location information, CSLI, right? So they could find out where he was over that period of time. So there's a lot of steps they could have taken. Not the least, I mean, the easiest one, Janine, is to stake out his house and just put some people in the back of the house and some people in the front of the house, not on his curtilage, not on his property. And so the second he hops in his car, just follow him around.
Well, that goes back to what Jewel and Jordan are saying, which is, come on, there's just common sense here that something's up. And so let's at least watch him. Kathy, you were going to ask something?
Yeah, I was just wondering, A, why they didn't, if you have any idea, if you could even guess why they didn't. And then B, you know, we do see so often people going in and being interrogated by the police. So those people are being willingly interrogated. They've decided not to plead, not to give their Fifth Amendment rights, or do they just maybe not have a lawyer? Do you, if you don't have a lawyer, can you still just plead your fifth without having counsel?
All right, let me peel back those many questions because those are all really good. All right. So can we pull up the Fifth Amendment and put it on the screen? Because this is at the heart of answering that. First off, you don't have to have a lawyer either on the hook for free, pro bono, in your back pocket, your cousin Vinny, nobody who is a lawyer to exercise your Fifth Amendment right. Okay. And so here it says, and I'm going to get to the money part of the definition. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, blah, 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 blah. Nor, look in the middle of the screen, shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So it's nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. All right, let's take that down. That means as against the government, first off. Okay, so the police are representatives of the government. And so if he says to his parents, and the parents said, hey, where's Gabby? What's going on? This is really strange. I mean, you bought the van together, you were engaged, now she's gone. Brian, this is really strange. And he says, hey, I killed her. Or, you know, did you kill her? I'm not going to tell you. He doesn't have a Fifth Amendment right against his parents. The police, he does. So he cannot be forced to say anything. Now, there's another aspect to Kathy's question. Miranda against Arizona. You heard of your Miranda rights, right? You have the right to an attorney. Well, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against your court of law. Your right to an attorney. If you can't afford one, one will be provided to you free of charge. Miranda applies only under two circumstances. One, in custody by the government, not your parents, not your Uncle Sal, the government. Two, official interrogation, official questioning. So let's pretend, Jewel, that he is standing next to his parents on September 11th, and his parent and the cops knock on the door, and the police say, we're looking for Brian, and the parents are like, and the parent and the police go, hey, Brian, we want to talk to you about Gabby. And he goes, yeah, I killed her. He's not in custody, and it's not an official interrogation. That comes in a trial if he's prosecuted for murder because it's a statement against interest, right? He's essentially confessing to that. Let's change the hypo. He's standing there next to mommy and daddy. They have reasonable suspicion that he is involved in something with her, and they don't know what it is. They say, young man, can we bring you into the police station for some questioning? He's like, yeah, sure, I'll come in. As long as you have Coca-Cola, I'll take a Coca-Cola. So he comes in, and they give him a nice cold Coca-Cola. They close the door, and he says, am I free to leave? And they said, no, not until you answer our questions. And they read him his Miranda rights, and he says, yeah, I'll waive my Miranda rights. I'll talk to you. And then he says, I killed her. Well, that's a lawful confession. He voluntarily waived his Miranda rights. That comes in. If after they read him his Miranda rights, he says, I'm not going to talk to you, or I want a lawyer, that's the end of the discussion. That's it. And that cannot be used against him in the trial. And that is a big difference between the United States of America and our constitutional republic and Mother England. Because in England, to this day, the government in a trial can comment on the accused's silence. And they can say, look at him sitting over there. If he was actually innocent, he'd take the stand and tell you he didn't do it. But look at him. He's just sitting there and hiding behind not taking the stand. In the United States, if you said that, if the prosecutor said that in a trial, that case would be thrown out.
Now, what about that at this point, she was only missing presumably. So they were looking for her, and he was the one with the information to find her. Now, that would only bring, so I know you can't be forced to necessarily help with an investigation that's
Correct.
not, you can't necessarily be forced to help with an investigation. But at that point, wouldn't the impetus be, we're trying to find this person, you're the one who could help us find her, and then the suspicion would be aroused when he's not cooperating and helping them find her.
Okay, let's go with that. All right, Tova, you heard his question?
Sorry, could you repeat what the question was?
Yeah, that.
I'll play it out real quick. He's standing next to mommy and daddy when the police show up on September 11th. And instead of mommy and daddy handing the lawyer's card over, the police go, Mr. Laundrie, you came back with the van and you were in Utah with Gabby. Your parents have reported her missing. What can you tell us about it? And he goes, oh my gosh, I know, I'm so distraught. I woke up on the morning of August 25th when we were in Grand Teton, and she was gone. Now, the night before, we were at a campfire, and she was flirting with this really handsome guy from Wyoming. But I mean, and he seemed to, be interested in her, but I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. But I woke up the next morning, and she's gone, and that guy's gone. Please help me find her. I don't know. I mean, I assume she's left me, and the engagement's off. I don't know what to do. I'm distraught. What are police supposed to do then?
Could they get, I mean, I assume they would try to check out his story and make sure that it's accurate, that he's telling the truth. So
okay, so they go to Yellowstone. They look for a handsome guy from Wyoming who drove a truck. That's every guy in Wyoming.
But I'm going to Wyoming. Just saying. Sign me up.
I mean, I guess they can look at the police footage of cars that come in and out because it's a national park and you have to have a pass now and, all that sort of thing. But I mean, are the police really going to run down that rabbit hole? Probably. They'll probably contact the authorities in Wyoming, and they may ended up finding out his story was complete hocus pocus, or that did happen and that guy killed her. I'm just saying, you can't jump to these conclusions. Now, do I think Brian Laundrie killed her? Yeah, I think he definitely did it. My gut tells me that. But what I'm trying to do is walk you through a lot of these legal concepts that are there that protect every one of us.
Yeah, and our legal
Brian Laundries of the world.
And our constitutional rights, and it's always interesting. My dad comes back to saying that our justice system designed to not put innocent people away more than it's designed to get every criminal behind bars.
Yeah,
and that's true, and that's part of being in America.
Right.
But
that's called the difference between type 1 and type 2 error. It's better to let the guilty person go than put one innocent person in jail, right? Now, let me throw another fact in here, which may advance the conversation.
But okay, before you do that, can you just recap? Like, we're running out of time, so
Yep.
15 seconds. Confession at the door. I'm a little confused. If he confesses at the door when they haven't arrested him, that's not held against him. But if he says it in the police, but it's not held. So anything you say to a police at your door will not be held against you?
Anything you say in public, that's not in violation of your Miranda rights, can be used against you in a criminal trial.
So
if he
at
blurts
the
it out
door,
to-
if he'd said it at the door, yeah, I did it, that would have been held against him.
That can be used against him in the building of a criminal case. Yeah.
Right.
Now, what if they never found the body? Right? What if they never found Gabby and only thing we have as evidence is he came home with the van and he said, I killed her. Most prosecutors would not even be able to go forward with a no body homicide case like that because you have just the evidence I told you. Now, there is other evidence. There is other evidence because remember this, if he killed her and he killed her in Wyoming, this is a Wyoming state law crime. What they have issued an arrest warrant for him on is his use of her Capital One debit card and PIN code with the intent to defraud. As he drove back across the country, after a while, they start looking at her credit cards, her bank statements, her social media, and they find that she's not using her credit card, but he's using her credit card, and he's using her PIN number, because no doubt when he went to an ATM, he punches in the number and there's his face right in the ATM, and they see him using her credit card. That's obviously probable cause to believe that he was using her credit card without her consent. And so a federal arrest warrant has been issued for him too. Now, that's not the serious crime. We all know that. But that is the way the feds have their hook in him. Because
so
now,
the federal warrant that they have right now is just about the PIN card, the card.
about the unauthorized use of her Capital One debit card. Yeah. And he did it, it's a federal crime to use somebody's credit card because it's an instrument of interstate commerce, but he also crossed state lines doing so. There's several federal nexuses to that crime. Now, if he killed her and he crossed state lines too, the feds can arrest him for murder, assuming they have more evidence that we're not aware of yet. Now, they also took they also have his DNA. All right. So if he left his DNA at the crime scene and they did the crime scene exploitation, and the DNA found on her in a place that would have significance to the homicide, maybe they'll be able to tie them together that way. But of course, two lovebirds are going to have their DNA on each other. Two people who are just friends in the same office are going to have each other's DNA, so it may not have any significance.
Well, I think what they want to see if there's anybody else's DNA on her.
That would be correct. So if that's right. So these stories never have a happy ending. I'm sorry to say. Here we have a dead, beautiful young lady and a young man who may or may not have done this. I think most of us think he did it, but he does enjoy the constitutional presumption of innocence. He did exercise properly his right against self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment, and the police went apparently through the right hoops to process the crime scenes consistent with the Fourth Amendment. And so we don't know how the story is going to end, but we know how her story ended, and it's tragic.
What kind of point were you trying to make with the Miranda rights and the confessing in the police department and saying it at the door? I still don't understand what the point was.
So Miranda applies in two circumstances only. One, official interrogation, and two, while in custody. So if the police bring him in to the police station and he says, "Hey, am I free to go whenever I want?" They say, "Yeah," then he's not in custody.
But wouldn't the Fifth Amendment do that? Why do you have to have Miranda rights if you've got the Fifth Amendment?
Because Miranda is a court-created prophylactic that allows and alerts people to their Fifth Amendment right, and also that statements they make voluntarily can be used against them in a criminal proceeding.
Okay. So in the last 2 minutes, I think we should see if there's an audience question. But I kind of want to recap what we learned, which is a lot, but also what they could have done. They could have surveilled him.
Yes.
Before even they could have looked at his cell phone. They could have.
Well, they could have gotten a warrant. They could have applied for a warrant through a magistrate to exploit his cell phone. Correct.
And you said a few things. Can you reiterate? There were like 5 things they could have done just based on reasonable suspicion.
Yeah, without asking permission from any judge, they could have staked out his house in the front or back. They could have followed him anywhere he went. 2, they could have gone to a magistrate or a judge with the information they had and asked for to tap his cell phone to find out who he's talking to and what he's saying, and it would be the contents of those calls. 4, they could have gone to his cell phone provider and got his cell site location information, CSLI, to find out all the places he was and continues to go, because that would have been helpful. If he slipped the cops when they were trying to surveil him, they could at least see, if he kept his cell phone on, where he's going, because your cell phone connects to towers all around you. So
he did this weird thing though. He bought a new phone and then left it behind. I don't really even understand what that's all about. But to have known where he was would have been cool. So you could do all that based on reasonable suspicion.
Reasonable suspicion. You don't need any reasonable suspicion to watch somebody in the public eye in plain view. But probable cause was required to get the warrants from the judge regarding the cell phone. Yeah.
Okay, Kathy, do we have it's like 3 o'clock, but maybe a 60-second,
Well, I'm hoping I didn't lose any audience questions. I got kicked off and I thought there were a couple. When I came back on, they weren't there, but I do have a comment from David Sawyer that says, excellent discussion and primer on the Fourth and Fifth Amendments and the criminal investigation and prosecution process. And Cully, I remember that you had mentioned the Sixth Amendment, and I don't think we've touched on that. Is there any aspect of the Sixth Amendment that is applicable to this case?
Not yet. It could become applicable if he's arrested, because then he's entitled to not only a speedy trial as defined by federal case law, but also a jury of his peers.
Okay.
But that remains to be seen.
And then one last question. Ann Johnson asks, what do you suggest the police do next?
I don't know everything they know. And so I would be loath to give them advice based on partial information. My gut tells me that there's more information at the hands of police than have been given to the public, and that they need to redouble their efforts to look at all the facts. In Florida, the toll system on all the highways reads license plates. So they're no doubt reading license plate readers, looking at toll booth cameras, highway cameras. There's an extensive camera system in Florida. The guy may be distraught. He may have killed himself. I don't think he's left the country, and I doubt he's left Florida.
yeah, but there was that person that said they saw him on the freeway, and that in another state, like Colorado, and got out of his car and said, I'm lost, and can you help me? I'm trying to get to California. Where are you trying to go? I'm trying to go to California, which is interesting because he probably has no cell phone, no map. He probably doesn't have a map. Probably, I would think reasonable suspicion. I would think, well, he probably would be lost. He doesn't want to get trapped.
I think there's probably APBs out for him, all points bulletins out for him. He's got to be able to support himself somehow. So I would be applying to a judge to tap the parents' phones and the parents' emails and the parents' communication devices. I'd reach out and try to find out who his friends are, the ones he reaches out to mostly, and tap their phones if the judge would sign off on that, because he's going to reach out to people. I mean, you eventually are going to catch him if he's alive, because he's going to need to eat, sleep, move about. And so my guess is they'll catch him in the next probably a few days, if not a few weeks.
Interesting. Well, this was fantastic. I think we could have talked forever. It's 3:03, but really a great, we got our own little law class here. This is terrific. Thank you so much. It was really, really informative. Tova, Jewel and Jorn, parting words.
Yeah, just thank you for talking about the legal system like that. I think that most people, once they think about it, though, I think most people are generally confused about how he got away, more so than that he wasn't arrested right away. And just for all of us in our audience, remember that someone's life, so we pray for her soul, and that we do thirsting for justice is part of it. It's more than vengeance. So I think that is somewhat of why it's gripping people, is because you innately want justice, and you want the person to answer for what you think they did.
Yeah, whoever it is, right? Whoever committed this crime, you hope that person or persons are brought to justice.
Well, he could help, even if you said, hey, we broke up and I didn't speak to her and she went off with some guy. At least they would know they could go maybe look for another guy. That would be helpful. Tova, do you have any parting thoughts?
I was just going to say, I really love this, and hopefully we can do more chats like this in the future. But I just thought it's great because, too often people just read about things on the news or on social media and these very quick sound bites and quick articles. And I just thought it was so valuable to be able to take an hour to dig deeply into it and actually think about it critically, like not just rush to judgments about anyone, and just think it through logically and constitutionally. So I thought that was really great. I personally learned a lot.
Well, you now know more than most lawyers in the country about how this works, because most don't practice criminal law. And there's a lot of interplay between the fourth and fifth and Miranda and reasonable suspicion and probable cause and beyond a reasonable doubt. And people throw those terms out there and they commingle them. But it's really important to not make assumptions, get to the bottom of the facts, and stick with the definitions in a direct application of the Constitution, because that's the document that has stood the test of time and protects all of us, including the Brian Laundries of the world, unless and until he's proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, he had good counsel, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it didn't take much to tell him to shut up. And apparently he he did that, at least for now. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get to get into the fact that the parents are protected. Are the parents protected in every state, or it just happens to be in Florida the parents are protected?
I don't think it's necessarily that they're protected, Janine. I think it's just that to the extent the investigation is ongoing, the police haven't moved or found anything to charge them with to leverage their position.
Yeah. Well,
They could end up being charged.
mostly in Florida, you can't, then they can't be considered, what's the word? Part of it, an accessory, if it's after the fact. So whatever they know, they're protected as a parent, a grandparent, or a child in Florida. I just didn't know if that was the same in every state.
I'm not sure that's true in Florida, depending on what they did. And in fact, because this could end up being a federal case, Florida law wouldn't even apply. It would be the federal law. And the federal law allows for accessory before the fact, an aider and abetter, or an accessory after the fact, or a conspiracy to commit XYZ crime. So I don't think that they're out of legal jeopardy at all, depending on what they did.
Okay. All right, we need to let you go. Kathy, you want to say thank you again? Thank you. Wonderful session. Thanks all for joining. Thank you. It was terrific.
Thank you. And one of our listeners, Herb Johnston, says he learned more about the Fourth and Fifth Amendments today than 5 evenings at a Constitution seminar he recently attended. So thank you very much, Cully. And we want to invite everybody to come back next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Our topic is going to be, can states control their own borders? And how can they control their own borders? So we hope you will join us for that. And thank y'all all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
again
you
for having me. It was great.
Yeah, you were terrific, Cully. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Always a
Julie,
pleasure.
always terrific. Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.